Actually.
That music always puts a spring into my step. Good morning, bienvenue, willkommen. Today is I'm with Jiten Chavda of Expat Finance. We're talking about two areas that we've already covered, but we're going to do it in slightly more detail: of inheritance tax and state pensions.
That's right. Yes. Hi, Gareth. Hi, everybody. There's been a few changes that have happened, which people need to be aware of. That was the main reason I wanted to talk to people and just share the knowledge that I've learned about the changes and what you can actually do to help yourself and your loved ones should you pass away. The other bit is to talk to you a little bit more about the UK state pension. People in Sweden or people outside of the UK are getting a little bit confused about the UK state pension. So it's really important just to clarify that and the changes that happened since April the 5th. That was the main reason I wanted to talk to people today. So what should we start off with first? Let's start off with the UK state pension. Okay, expats that have lived outside the UK, if they've worked in the UK, they've paid national insurance contributions in the UK, okay, which you're entitled to in whichever country you reside in. So when you get to retirement, currently at 67 years old, you're entitled to the state pension. Depending on how much national insurance you paid throughout your working life will dictate on how much of a state pension you get. It's done on a pro rata basis. So if you work for the minimum is, by the way, 10 years. You've got to pay national insurance for 10 years to get anything from the UK state. Okay, that's really important that people are aware of that. So if you're an expat that's lived outside the country for 8 or 9 years, you need to make sure that you contribute to make sure you get to minimum 10 years.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is the maximum state pension currently is $12,750 a year. Okay, but you have to have contributed 35 years to get the maximum state pension. Okay, now some people, believe it or not, have been what we call contracted out of the state earnings related pension scheme, which was many years ago that people were contracted out. Now, what that basically meant was you were paying less national insurance then. That was the base benefit that you got from contracting out. However, to get the maximum state pension now, you've got to do 37 years. Okay, so if you've been contracted out, you've got to do 37 years. If you're contracted in, then it's 35 years. So that's two things to bear in mind. Okay. The next thing is that if you're now been living in a foreign country for, let's say, 10 years, okay, right, you're going to get the minimum state pension. But if you're still fairly young, you can still contribute for future years to come. Because the big panic I had with people just before April the 5th was people wanted to contribute into their state pension and they were panicking because they had to go back because the rules that changed from April the 5th, you could have gone back to 2006 to make up any missing years you had.
Right.
However, if you're fairly young and you're out of the country, then all you can do is see from now till your retirement date how many years you've got left. So you can actually carry on contributing even though you're not in the UK. In that way, you can enhance your state pension. I did some calculations with some clients recently, and they were panicking about, oh, they're going to miss the deadline and they've got to pay a lot of money, and they were very confused about it all. So what we did was we looked at how many years they can carry on contributing from now until their retirement date. And believe it or not, they didn't have to pay back any months they'd missed, any years they'd missed, if they just carried on contributing from now onwards. Okay. The two things that people need to be aware of when you're making voluntary contributions, these are voluntary contributions you're making. There's two types. There's class 2 and class 3. Class 3 is about £900 a year. Class 2 is £190 a year. So if you want to make up full years, when you apply to HMRC to get calculations on how much you need to pay, they always default to class 3. You need to speak to them, write to them, say, no, I've been out of the country, I'm working in a different country, I'd like to pay class 2 national insurance contributions. Okay, it's really important.
And class 3 is how much?
£900 a year.
Right, so it's quite substantially different, really.
Yes, it is. And I had an old friend of mine. She contacted me, panicking about national insurance contributions because she was scared that she didn't have enough. So she was borrowing money from everywhere just so she had the money. And by the way, it was about £10,000 she had to get together. But then when we spoke about it, she realised actually she hadn't lived in the UK for many. She hadn't been in the UK for the last 15 odd years anyway.
Right.
So but when she got the letter from HMRC, it said Class 3 national insurance contributions. So that's when the panic came in. And eventually she contacted them, and guess what? She ended up paying Class 2 national insurance.
So that all the effort and time she'd put together to gather all that money from family and friends was actually not necessary.
Yeah, exactly. Not necessary. So it is important that you actually look at the years you've actually contributed and carry on contributing throughout the country to making sure you get to the maximum. Once you get to the maximum, you don't need to worry. Okay, so that's the UK state pension. It is an important one. People neglect it because they're young and they don't worry about it, or they may think, I was only in the UK for 10 years, I only paid national insurance for 6 years. It doesn't make sense because the amount of money you're going to get at retirement is going to be substantially a lot more than you would do. 1 year, if you just did 10 years worth of national insurance contributions, you're the minimum, you're going to get about £3,600 a year. Okay, but adding an extra year, you're going to get about £4,000 a year. So it's a difference about £400 a year that you'll get at retirement, and you'll get it every year.
Right. So if you're going to live another 10 years, we're talking a decent amount of money.
Exactly it. And nowadays people living longer and everything, it's really important to have the state pension, because the state pension will carry on paying you until you die. So it's quite an important one to bear in mind. If people in Sweden, they want to have a discussion about the Swedish state pension, I'd gladly talk to them about the Swedish state pension as well if they want. The things you can do with the Swedish pension, not very much, but a little bit you can do. Okay, that's really all I wanted to talk to about the UK state pension. Okay, because people are unaware they can carry on contributing from now onwards.
So today's one is going to be slightly shorter than normal, but what I do want to draw people's attention to is the QR code that should be somewhere above my head, I think. And that QR code will lead you straight through to Jiten, so you could start that journey. His website is replete. Should have most of the information that you need, plus some very comforting photos. But also, I would say, start your connection, have a chat. He's very keen to give you the information you need to make the best decisions. I mean, half the time I find people making decisions without necessarily knowing what the ins and outs are. And really, you need to speak to someone who's outside of the whole thing and can tell you what really the conditions are, and that will help you make the right decision. It's a lot of the decisions you're making are ones that are going to affect you long term, so it's worthwhile taking some advice.
The next thing I wanted to talk to people about was inheritance tax.
Oh,
a few changes have happened with inheritance tax. Now, there's a thing called UK domiciled or UK non-domiciled. It's important that you need to clarify the difference. Just because you've left the country, it doesn't mean you're not UK domiciled. If you're classed as UK domiciled, the UK tax office will tax you on inheritance tax on all your worldwide assets. So if you've left the country and you've been out of the country for 8 years and then you pass away, the property or anything you've got in that foreign country will still be taxed for inheritance tax purposes in the UK. So people could end up being shocked, thinking, "Oh, I've left the country. I don't need to worry about it." And because I'll give you an example, in Sweden, there's no inheritance tax. So people think, well, if I die tomorrow, my husband dies tomorrow, my wife dies tomorrow, there won't be an inheritance tax. You have to be very careful of that. It's your worldwide assets that they look at if you're classed as UK domicile.
Right.
Yeah. The rules that are changing is they're making it much easier to work out whether you're UK domiciled or not. Because in the past, there was lots of different formulas that you needed. If you had any assets in the UK, family in the UK, and so forth, you were still classed as a UK domicile person. But the rules are much, much simpler now. And what they've done is you have to have lived outside the UK for 10 years of the past 20 years to be classed as a non-domiciled UK person. So I'll repeat that. It's 10 years, consecutive 10 years,
right?
Consecutive 10 years in the last 20 years that you've lived outside the UK. It's very important that you realise that. Once you've done that, you're not classed as a UK domicile person. Okay. The next thing after that is one other thing that's changed, okay, which is people's pensions. Okay, now pensions, if they've got a UK pension, if anybody's got a UK pension, unfortunately, a UK pension, even if you've been out of the country for 10 years, it's still classed as a UK asset. Okay, now,
Right.
so if you were to pass away, even after 10 years, and you've lived outside the 10 years, that pension pot, for most people, won't really affect it because they'll be below their allowance anyway. So it won't affect it. But some people I've come across recently, they've got large lump sums in the UK. And often the large lump sums are people with final salary pension schemes. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
Now, what they do with final salary, I know the figure at the top of my head of somebody that happened recently, a client of mine who had a final salary pension scheme in the UK, and to transfer that pension out, the pot would be worth about £600,000.
Good Lord.
Okay, but the client would get a pension of £29,000 a year when he got to retirement. But the problem is, if he now passes away before he gets to retirement, even after retirement, there's still a value of that pot. That value of that pot will still be 600,000. So if they're single and they've got a pot of 600,000 in a final salary pension scheme in the UK, it's going to be taxed as a UK asset for your inheritance tax purposes. So whoever benefits from that is going to have a tax bill to pay on that. Okay, so it's really important that people actually start looking at these types of things, making a list of what they've actually got, where the assets actually are, how long they've been out of the country for. And once they've gone out of the country for 10 years, there's things we can do with UK pensions, but not final salary pensions. I wouldn't recommend actually moving a final salary pension after moving a final salary if you've left the country. Final salary pensions are rare, by the way. Now, those pensions, final salary pensions, will carry on paying you until you die. In most cases, it's until you die. So, and then you have spouse's pension as well. So if you were married and you passed away, your spouse would receive half, in most cases, half what you were receiving.
Right.
There's quite a lot that we need to consider there.
Quite right.
And there's other people that, because they've got big pension pots, they're actually gifting the money away to their children. Okay, by gifting it, it's coming out of your estate. As long as you survive for 7 years, it's outside your estate.
7 years is that magic number.
Is that magic number? Yeah. So it's important that you think to yourself, okay, how much do I have? If I were to pass away tomorrow, what would happen? The other thing associated with that, which I'm encouraging more and more people to do, is make a list of all their assets. Yeah. I've got a confession to make. Even though I do this job, even though I've been doing this job for many years, I forgot I had a small pension left in the UK. It's only a small pension, but if I were to pass away tomorrow, nobody would know about that pension, and that pension will be lost. So the important thing is make a list of every assets you've got, where the asset actually is, and give it to somebody that you trust. With the will, if you've got a will as well, by the way.
Yes, well, I was going to ask you about that. All this, pensions and so on, they're all willable, aren't they?
Yes. Well, no, the pension will still be part of your estate.
Right.
It's still classed as you still have to do probate on that estate. So you can't gift it away like that. You know, I've got a pension, I've dropped dead tomorrow, the pension goes to the kids. It's not as simple as that. It's still, you still have to go through probate because it's left in the UK. If you have a property in the UK, by the way, when you pass away, that's also classed as your tax for inheritance tax in the UK as well. So it is important that you look at any assets you've got left in the UK, even if you've been out of the country for 10 years.
Right. Well, look, thank you so much, Jiten. Once again, some sage words of wisdom at a time when people are a little bit confused about this sort of thing. As I've said before, please look at the QR code, scan that, and start your journey by having a chat with Jiten, who will absolutely set you straight. And at least you'll know where you stand. And his, at least initially, his advice is absolutely gratis. The best thing to do is have that conversation. Jiten, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And to all of you out there, please try and keep your feet on the ground, reach for the stars, and look after that mental health in these troubled times. Until next time, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.